for me to interpret. And that's when we had the old nutrition screen without all the detail that we have today. So it's not necessarily easy to interpret. You know, you have to go with the flow with it, as with the rest of the scan. Nutritional priorities, they can come and go. It may be indicating that there's a deficiency, or it could be an excess of a particular nutrient, or there may be an issue with the body using it. Or often, and this is the thing I probably see most, it's just part of the pattern on the screen. It's part of the jigsaw, you know, helping you to put the pieces together for your client. So if there's, you know, one thing I'd say first off about that, and I'm sure you all do it, you know, I don't even need to say it, but one thing is read your client, not the scan. If nutrition isn't your thing, don't get bogged down in it. Do what you do best. You know, that's why your client has come to see you. And you know, a good, healthy, general diet is going to support your client. And, you know, sometimes that's all they need. Hydration, a good varied diet, protein, fat, you know, we can all do that. And that's going to help. Remember too, that we can use infoceuticals for nutrition needs. So you can always think of that, and you can always add an infoceutical into the mix, just because, you know, you're talking to your client and you know, they might want some digestive oomph. So you could give them stomach driver, even if it doesn't come up as a high priority. So, you know, stomach, liver, pancreas driver, those are the ones, you know, the key ones that sort of give some oomph to the digestive system. And the flow integrators, they also can link with particular nutrients. When Peter Fraser was doing his matching, and then he was matching certain integrators with certain nutrients. So I mean, it'd be really great if those were in the help files, actually. So every time you looked at the help file, there was a little thing that's just reminded you of that. But I've actually put it on your handout. So EI1, large intestine integrator, that matches with iodine, cobalt, molybdenum, boron, and sulfur. So, you know, if those come up in the scan, you could also give EI1, for example, because everything's energy at the end of the day, and a nutrient has a particular vibration, but you know, it could have other sort of connotations. It could even have emotional associations with a nutrient. So, you know, be open to exploring with it and playing around with your scan, really, I think. Look for the general picture, I'd always say as well. Don't get bogged down in the detail. And that was sort of shown to me quite early on, actually, with one of my very first clients when using the NES system. Yeah, it's probably my first week. I had this gamekeeper come to see me who had, you know, chronic digestive issues. He had really loose stools. He was really, really worried. He had bowel cancer. He hadn't. It had been checked out, and that was all fine. When we sat down, did the scan, looked at the nutrition screen, and I have never, you know, I've been using it for a week. I've never seen so many priorities on a nutrition scan before or since. Everything was pretty much orange or red. So it was wow. But it was good though, because it was a real wake-up call for him to sort of do things differently. And I had no idea. I was thinking, oh, a gamekeeper, what a life, you know, outside, you know, with your pheasants and wandering around on the moors, how beautiful. Never realized what a stressful job it is. It's just so full on. You've got to, you know, stress about the weather, stress about the people coming in for a shoot, stress about looking after the baby pheasants, this, that, and the other. Really, really stressful, sort of anxious job. So he was always on the go, like charging around, stressing his sympathetic nervous system, switching off his rest and digest system, the parasympathetic system. And he was eating a rubbish diet. I mean, he was pretty much living off cereal, bread, and lager. So hardly surprising, really. He didn't have quite all the nutrition he needed. Also, his doctor had given him some acid suppressing medication, and he'd been taking that for a few months, so that wasn't really helping either. So so we worked on supporting his digestion and on boosting his nutrition. And with him, you know, diet wasn't just going to do it. Also, he just couldn't do it with all his running around. So I gave him a really good sort of multi-nutrient powder. Yeah, he was really, really good at taking that, and you know, the following month he came back and already, you know, that nutrition scan was showing improvements. And then over the months, he just stuck with it until his nutrition scan was just about probably the best nutrition scan I've ever seen, just because he just stuck with it religiously, putting in his nutrients and supporting his digestive system. And so we had hardly any priorities at all. But one thing we had some issues with sorting were B vitamins, and that was another example of how, you know, I could see this pattern over time. We just couldn't get his B vitamins. They were just always red. And they're water soluble. We use them up in stress. So, you know, so we gave him a B complex and said, well, you know, there you go, take that. And then it didn't really shift. So I said, well, you know, take that B complex 3 times a day. Make sure you take it with every meal. Nope, didn't really shift, maybe a bit. So I said, oh, okay, you know, no harm. Take it every 2 hours, at least, you know, take it every 2 hours. Just keep popping those B vitamins. It's not going to harm for a month, you know, for a short time. And then he came back and they were all clear. So that was like a real sort of, oh, you know, trust your scan, because there you can see the pattern in the scan matching with your client and what your client's doing. You know, so it just gave me great confidence in trusting my scan, you know, really early on. And I think that's a key thing as well, because, you know, patterns evolving over time, I think, are really significant. I'm just going to see if I could quickly share my screen now and share this. Can people see that? Does that work?
It does work, so yeah.
Thanks. So this is in the client section. I guess we've all gone there. It's a little bit sort of frustrating that we have to dive into the client section to look at the scan comparisons, and also it doesn't come up with a document for you. This is a cut and paste I've done for a client, just dragging it in and then sort of converting it into a PDF. And I can't actually see because there's all these pictures here, but I mean the one, can you see the end of this document? Can you see all of it, or is some of it cut off?
I can see all of it, yeah. If people can't see it all, can you just put it in the chat box for me?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We don't actually have to see a visual of it, but I can't see the end because I've got all these little pictures going of everyone here going down the side. But on the right hand, you can ask to see the average, so you can sort of see nutrients that come up over time, or environmental toxins, or food sensitivities, and I just think that's really useful. And this is one of a boy I've been seeing with autism, and you know, DHA came up, and there's a sort of like good evidence to use that sometimes. So we gave that, and then it's clear. I can
Sue,
quickly.
Sue, can I
Hello?
just interrupt very quickly?
Yeah.
John's just put in there that if you go where all the pictures are, you can actually minimize those down, so they won't be on your screen anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. I don't know how to get you back again, mind you.
Well, don't worry about that. We'll figure that one out later.
Okay. Well, cobalt was something that kept coming up for this boy, and you know, there is sometimes an issue with. I mean, cobalt is a funny one to read because it links to B12, and sometimes B12 doesn't show and cobalt does. It's always been a bit of a difficult one for me to get my head around. I think it tells me that there's an issue with B12 metabolism, or you know, with the metabolism of B12. That's the pattern I normally see. I think that's what I see the most. So cobalt was showing. I mean, I didn't give it because, you know, you've got to be a bit careful. You don't want to sort of go in there, but you know, come up for three months in a row. So then we gave it, and then it cleared, and we gave it in the form of a patch. So I just wanted to say that. I just want to get everyone back now. I wish I hadn't minimized you.
Okay, if you where you've got, you should say where you're talking. You should be able to then put back on the grid video.
I've stopped share actually, so that's fine. I can see everybody again. Good. So that, you know, looking at patterns over time, I think is really useful. I just want to sort of say a little bit about supplementation. And I don't think I even need to say this to anyone because I know you all know it, but, you know, diet is the most important thing to focus on. Because, you know, who knows how many components there are in a healthy diet, you know. 25,000 plus, you know, molecules in a varied healthy diet. So we know we really are eating a universe of information. So, you know, it's certainly not all about nutritional supplements. It's about healthy diet fundamentally. I always tend to go with a multi-nutrient rather than individual ones. But if something keeps coming up over time, or even, you know, if you can really tie it in with your client, then yeah, there's no harm in giving an individual nutrient. But just sort of remember that they all work together. You know, some are really sort of work together in groups. Some are synergistic and some are antagonistic, and often it's both. For example, calcium, magnesium and phosphorus all work together. So they work synergistically, but if you have too much of one, and that's very often calcium, I'll often see people taking calcium, you know, for their bones, I think, you know, or on a vegan diet, maybe just taking calcium, and that can block, an excess of that can block magnesium and phosphorus. And the same with iron, zinc and copper, they work together. Too much of one, it's often iron. I see people taking iron supplements, and that can block zinc or copper and other vitamins as well. So it's just like to be cautious of that and aware of that if you're not already, and I'm sure you are. But I just do want to tell you a little story I've got on iron, because I just found that very fascinating in the light of my scan. And guess what? It involves my gamekeeper again. So a few years after I saw him, he came to me with anemia, and I'd never seen anyone looking so pale. It's like white as a sheet. And normally, you know, he was healthy outdoors, like ruddy complexion. He was so white and breathless and exhausted. And he'd had a tooth abscess, which was absolutely terrible, really, really terrible infection. And he'd had, you know, 2 courses of really strong antibiotics to clear it. And after that, he'd developed anemia, and he definitely had anemia. And he also knew from a blood chemistry that he had low red blood cells and low iron. So he definitely had iron deficiency anemia, but they didn't look at other stuff like B12 or folate. They didn't look at that. So he was just about to start taking iron. Anyway, we scanned him and did the scan. Absolutely no priority on the scan. Iron was completely, even though he needed it, it wasn't showing as a priority. And I think that's because the body said, look, I don't actually want this iron right now. I can't remember everything that was showing, but I remember vitamin E was a top priority, and free radicals, which isn't on the new scan, or it is actually on there. If you look in the scan comparisons, you can see that old free radicals inflammation priority. So that was a top priority, along with vitamin E. And you know, vitamin E protects red blood cells. So what I thought was going on was a hemolytic anemia. His immune system was destroying his red blood cells. They weren't living as long as they should be. And so, and that's why he was anemic. And that's an inflammatory, that's like the sort of cytokine storm that we're hearing a lot about these days with the immune system. So an iron can exacerbate that. It's with its reaction with oxygen. So think of how think about iron will rust when it's exposed to oxygen. So I think his body was saying, you know, I don't want iron now. So, you know, I persuaded him not to take it, and I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but I just thought, well, you know, if we give him some good food sources of iron, that's the best way to go anyway. Don't give an individual iron supplement. So, you know, he stuck with it and he did that, and I did give vitamin E, and I gave a good sort of antioxidant approach as well. And yeah, he came back the next month and it was working. He was looking a bit better, and he was got more color in his cheeks. His energy was coming back. We did the scan, big red priority on iron. So, you know, bang, there was, you know, that was his body needed iron then. It was ready for it. His red blood cells were ready for it. So then we gave iron, not iron, we gave him a multi-nutrient containing iron and folate and zinc and things to build the blood. But, you know, I think that was again a real sort of You're always sort of puzzling sometimes, or I'm puzzling, thinking, well, you know, gosh, you know, he's deficient in iron. Why isn't it showing? I think that's why it was showing, because his body didn't want it then, or couldn't handle it. Wouldn't have made any difference. We had to reduce the inflammation first of all. So that's some little stories. And the second bit of this, I'm going to talk about some patterns. So what I need to do is share my screen again. That should hopefully be working.
Yeah, we can see that too, yeah.
Yeah, you can see that? Okay, I can't see you guys, but it doesn't really matter. I'll just talk to my screen. And so, can you see me? You can, can't you?
I've actually taken you out of my screen so I can just see the scan. Other people might be able to see you, but
okay.
It's only be a very small picture, yeah.
Okay. Well, I've done a handout on some of the patterns that I'm going to be talking to you about. So, God, I really wish, sorry, it's distracting me not being able to sort of see anyone.
Okay, we are all still here.
Yeah, I know, okay. I will just very quickly see if I can maximize this, but I don't seem to be able to, never mind. No, okay. So we're going to look at some patterns with digestion and absorption, and we're going to kick off with low stomach acid. So the first thing to think about with that is your client, of course, and if it's an upper digestive tract issue, then you're going to get upper digestive tract symptoms, things like acid reflux, indigestion, heartburn, and feeling excessively full after meals, or bloating shortly after meals. Those are the classic symptoms. If we look at the nutrition screen, you know, you might see sort of nutritional priorities coming up all over the place, like with my gamekeeper, or it could be in a particular area. You might see something coming up under the digestion and metabolism area. You might see protein metabolism, for example, because we definitely need hydrochloric acid to kickstart the digestion of proteins. Other nutrients that are coming up, and these are all on a handout, and I'm sure most of you know this anyway, but sometimes it's really good to sort of have it written, I think, as a pattern, so you can just sort of think, oh yeah, that's it, you know, as a good reminder. The things to look out for then are B12, which can't be absorbed without intrinsic factor, and that needs hydrochloric acid. Iron and zinc, they also need acid for absorption. And then you might also want to look at B1 and betaine and zinc, because they're all involved in the process of making hydrochloric acid. So look out for those. Now within the scan, and this is how I do much of my pattern recognition, I'm looking in at the energy flow areas, and then I'm looking within at the tissues. So I will go in and I will look at the I11, and then look within the stomach. And then I'm going to be looking at all these priorities here. So if you've got, you know, a priority on the stomach mucosa, I mean, it's not diagnostic, of course, but you can think, is there inflammation there? Is this person having sort of instant reactions to food? So whatever they eat is going to be difficult for them to handle, because there just isn't enough mucosa there. The stomach's super sensitive. That might also be in the esophagus here. If they've got acid reflux, that might show. You might see something in the stomach field generally. You've got the pyloric glands, which are, they produce sort of gastrin, a hormone involved with digestion. You've got these stomach peptic glands, and that's a little bit, well, it's not confusing, but peptic glands, there are several of them, but they, a certain type of them produce hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. So I do see that pattern. I will see a sort of 4 priority here if someone needs hydrochloric acid, or I will see a 4 on the stomach mucosa. And also I'm always reading my clients, so I'm not necessarily going to give hydrochloric acid until I've soothed the stomach, taken away the things that could be irritating it, and given the body some stuff to help soothe that stomach, so it can then later on handle some stimulation with hydrochloric acid. Of course, you can always use EI11, and you can use stomach driver, so you can use the MyHealth, and there's all sorts of things you can do. So that is the most common thing I'll see, that the pattern, and that's my little low stomach acid pattern. Next digestive pattern is fat digestion. So if your client has a fat digestion issue, they're going to find it difficult to digest fatty foods. That's pretty obvious. There might be a bitter taste in the mouth, especially after meals, or pain between the shoulder blades, and that's relating to the gallbladder, and we need bile from the gallbladder to digest fats. And there might be some signs of deficiency of fats in their body, like dry skin, sensitivity to insect bites, excessive earwax can be a sign of not having enough essential fats. And then there could be immune and hormonal issues as well. In the scan, I will take note in the digestion and metabolism area of fat metabolism, that's going to sort of like flag up that something could be going on. And then when I look at fat digestion, I'll look at stomach, because it's always kickstarts everything, but particularly for fat digestion, I'm looking at the bile ducts, and within the gallbladder and the stomach around here, we've got them both there. So bile ducts, gallbladder, that might suggest that something's going on there. And this is, patterns I've seen time and time again. So if people have priorities there, there's normally an issue with fat digestion or detoxification, or some signs of feeling nauseous, or that pain around the shoulder blades. So I always find it to be accurate. When you're looking at the nutrition screen, the patterns you might see with that are obviously to do with fat digestion. So are there priorities in the fat area, the omega-3s or 6s or whatever. Fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. And some of the nutrients that are needed for fat metabolism are magnesium, calcium, zinc, and B6. So maybe be aware of those, because they could be showing, and that might be part of the picture if your client can digest fats, but the fat metabolism issue is because they haven't got nutrients to actually break them down, or sort of break them down into sort of those hormone-like substances that the body needs for various tasks. So the next scan one, is everyone still with me? All right, Helen?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Can I just interject with something here?
You can.
You remember?
I can't see anyone.
Oh,
it's fine. I did.
Yeah, I'm definitely here. Do you remember, Stuart? Actually, you actually really helped me with this. It was a few years ago. I actually had a major problem with my gallbladder, and I was due to fly to New York with my daughter for her belated 21st birthday present. And I was in so much pain. I ended up going to see my GP, who was absolutely useless. But Sue really helped me with this, and sort of got me able to go on the trip. And when I got back, I went for an ultrasound. They couldn't find anything wrong with my gallbladder at all. But what was really interesting, it wasn't sort of a sort of physical digestive issue, because I had a very healthy diet and looked after myself. What had happened prior to the gallbladder episode was I'd had a major stress in my life that I had no control over, and I couldn't make a decision on what to do. And so sometimes we perhaps need to look at the, as Sue said, like look at the person, what's actually happening with the person at this particular time. And all of this stuff was going on for me, and it has affected the function of my upper digestive system.
Yeah, no, quite. You always need to look at the person, and then it always makes sense. So with any digestion, you look at stress, you look at ESR. But when I'm looking at the infoceuticals, I'm normally seeing those as solutions rather than a specific pattern, because infoceuticals can be used for so many different things. But in terms of the overall scan, they're very much part of the picture. Yeah. So yeah, Yeah, that's really interesting. Glad you got to go, Helen, on that trip.
I had a wonderful time, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to look at malabsorption, leaky gut, and I just want to say with that, we do have a malabsorption priority in that digestive metabolism section. I don't really look at that because it's mainly linked to infoceuticals, and as I said, those infoceuticals could be prioritized for many different reasons. Or the iron there, that could be too high. I've seen that before with someone with hemochromatosis, so that iron doesn't necessarily mean malabsorption of iron. So I don't look at that malabsorption priority. With the sugar regulation one and the glucose metabolism one, they'll standalone priorities. They'll just come up of their own accord. The malabsorption one only comes up because of the infoceuticals and nutrients that are within it. So I tend to ignore that one myself, and it's also because I've been using this and finding my own way for working out malabsorption from the scan before we had all of these new priorities in here anyway. So I'm looking again at my clients, and of course that's not so straightforward because leaky gut is a link with inflammatory and immune conditions. So it's, chronic pain, leaky gut, autoimmune, leaky gut, food sensitivity, leaky gut, heal the gut, heal the gut, heal the gut. It's so common in any health condition. So it's not just digestive, but any sort of chronic pain, any chronic condition really, suspect leaky gut. On the nutrition screen, again, you might see multiple priorities across the nutrition screen. Some of the nutrients that are harder to digest are B12, iron, fat-soluble vitamins, and amino acids. You might also see the fat, protein, and carbohydrate metabolism sections highlighted, and that can be helpful in pinpointing the actual pattern that might be going on if there's a digestive malabsorption issue. With the scan, I always take a peek into EI3. I always peek in at EI3 because I'm always very interested in looking at the villi and the ileum tunica serosa field. So it's not diagnostic, but if I see top priorities there, I'm suspecting inflammation. And I've seen that pattern quite a lot. And also in EI11, there's the duodenum mucosa field. So again, if that's a top priority there, like a 4, 3 or 4, there might be some inflammation there, or the body's just not got the nutrients to make that mucosal surface that protects the digestive tract, or there's some form of dysbiosis going on that's breaking it down. So look at those, and then you could see priorities too in food allergy and particular food sensitivities as well, of course. Autoimmunity might show, but I always look at the infoceuticals as being the solution, not necessarily revealing the pattern. And that's also from experience, because I'll see autoimmune pop up and then it goes away again. So it's not saying someone's autoimmune today, but they're not tomorrow. It's saying, oh, this, I really need this infoceutical today, but actually the next day I'll need this one more, so let's park that one for a while. So I don't tend to look at that if I'm thinking leaky gut autoimmunity. That I don't put that autoimmunity star in my pattern recognition. One pattern I have seen with celiac disease, and I've seen this with confirmed celiac disease, and people have had a test and they've had the villi looked at, and they've had an endoscopy. And with suspected, the pattern I've seen is red back in those days, red on gluten, and then a 4 priority on the villi and a 4 priority on the ileum tunica serosa. And I've seen that so many times. One was with a homeopath friend of mine who I kept trying to persuade to, go on a gluten-free diet, but he was really resistant until we scanned him, and then he had the red on gluten and the 4 priorities on the villi and the ileum tunica serosa, and he didn't get tested, but so we don't know for sure, but he gave up gluten, and the very first night he did, his stomach pain went and his knees stopped hurting. So he definitely had a real sort of issue with gluten for sure. So that's a little digestive one. now going to move on to whooshing through here. How are we doing for time? We've got time.
Yeah, you're good.
Good. I'm gonna just open up the protein screen. I can't slow my computer. So here we have all the sort of amino acids. So, you know, this is a bit of a complex area. There's absolutely no need to get bogged down in it. If, you know, nutrition isn't your thing, you know, don't worry about it. But amino acids take part in many different functions, but the main ones to think about, I suppose, are detoxification, energy production, and neurotransmitter metabolism. Look out for a protein metabolism priority. That's a standalone priority. If it comes up, it's going to tell you there's an issue somewhere, but you're not going to know where necessarily. Is there a dietary need? Are they not eating enough? Is there a digestion and absorption issue? Remember, hydrochloric acid you need for protein digestion. Absorption, there could be inflammation, there could be leaky gut. Or is it sort of further on? Is there a conversion problem? Are there some of the nutrients missing that the body needs to convert one amino acid into another to make something else? It could be that. Yeah, but you know, it could be pretty much anything, and you're not going to know, but you just have to look at your client first and to see if you can see a pattern within the scan as a whole, and also to look at the scan comparisons over time, because that's why I think it's really interesting. If you see an amino acid keep coming up, it's really trying to tell you something. I tend not to give individual amino acids. I tend to sort of, I'm always going with get the basics, you know, cut the stress, nourish, you know, and an amino acid balance can just come back into balance of its own accord if you get rid of stress sometimes. So, yeah, but sometimes I'll do it. What I want to say is, you know, the very first time we got this new nutrition scan, I was well excited, of course, but the very first client I scanned with a new nutrition and food sensitivity scan screen was someone who came to me for help with food sensitivities. So we're thinking that's really great because, you know, we've got many more food sensitivities now. So we'll see what shows. So she'd always been able to eat absolutely anything until she picked up a stomach infection when traveling 3 years previously in India and South America, I think. And she was getting increasing reactions to foods, which was causing her to have to rush off to the toilet pretty sharpish. So what came up in her food scan were food sensitivities in eggs and tyramine. I mean, I always expect the gluten and the dairy, but they didn't show. It was eggs and tyramine. And in the amino acid section, there were priorities on tyrosine and taurine. So tyrosine and taurine down here. And it was bang on because the food she was reacting to were high in tyramine, like soya sauce, certain cheeses, and yogurt. And her boyfriend had been giving her lots of healthy yogurt for breakfast, and this just was making her much worse. And she could think, sometimes I can eat pizza, but sometimes I can't. It was dependent whether it had cheese or not. But it was a certain type of cheese, not just cheese. So it really made perfect sense. And with eggs, she realized that it was the egg in cake that she was reacting to, or, you know, it wasn't the sugar or the flour, it was the egg. So it made perfect sense to her, really exciting for me. And I just thought, gosh, that is so bang on. That's very exciting. And tyramine is produced when tyrosine is fermented or aged. So, you know, that's why it's in aged cheeses and fermented yogurt. And the scan was showing me this pattern. It wasn't a need for tyrosine. It was showing me that her body was fermenting tyrosine into tyramine, if it's still with me, and that this was a trigger for her digestive reaction. And I think you had someone, Helen, with that, and it was migraines. I seem to remember you telling me when we had a conversation about it. And that's a common thing with tyramine. It can be a trigger for migraines. With her, it wasn't. It was a digestive issue. But a certain bacteria can cause this reaction, and so she probably had some low-lying infection, you know, still there from her trip abroad that was converting it, you know, too rapidly, tyrosine too rapidly into tyramine. There may have been some genetic things there also in the background, which just came to the surface, you know, once she'd had that stomach upset. Taurine is a sulfur amino acid. You know, that was a top priority in a scan, but that can help the liver to clear tyramine. So I think that also fitted with the pattern. And B6 came up, and that's a very important nutrient for amino acid and neurotransmitter metabolism. So you know, always take a note of B6. You know, but that again was, you know, just part of the pattern, and I was just so excited and so blown away with it. And I think it's almost sort of happens like that. When I remember thinking, oh gosh, am I going to be able to sort of read all of this? You know, even though in theory I know that nutrition screen very well, I'm still thinking, oh, and it just will show me no, it, you know, it's very accurate. Always trust it. So it's a complex area. If you don't know about it, don't worry about it. If something jumps out at you, fantastic. I did think it might be interesting to cover a vegan vegetarian diet, because that's something that is, you know, it's very popular these days, and it's not necessarily the best diet for all or at all times. Sometimes you can do it, and sometimes, you know, or detoxification, maybe it's not the best. It sort of really depends. So there are sort of patterns to look at with that, to see if someone's sort of lacking in nutrients on a vegan or vegetarian diet. With the client, the things I'm often seeing are, you know, weight gain, finding it hard to lose weight or burn fat because they're just having far too much carb in relation to protein and not enough good fats. Fatigue, you know, you know, energy production just isn't working well. Anxiety and depression, you know, you need amino acids from proteins to make neurotransmitters, and detoxification issues sometimes too. So the nutrients to that might be low in a plant-based diet are B12, iron, vitamin D, calcium, zinc, and omega-3. But there are also some amino acids to look out for too. So I'm just going to stop sharing if I can, which is here, and I'm going to share something else. For those that don't know, there we go. So there are rate limiting amino acids. So every sort of food has a sort of a balance of amino acids, little amino acid profile. And if a rate limiting amino acid is the ability at which the body can use that protein source to build tissues, to make things, and it's limited by the rate limiting amino acid, if that makes sense. So here in this one, we're looking at this foodstuff, the rate limiting amino acid. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the rate is, you know, is methionine. And that is a nutrient that is low in legumes and vegetables. So, you know, if you're vegan, is not having very many legumes or vegetables, is not having very many grains or nuts and seeds, sorry, then, you know, there could be an issue with methionine. So if methionine is showing, encourage your client to have more grains or nuts and seeds. And lysine is the opposite. So lysine is a rate limiting amino acid. It's low in grains and in most nuts and seeds. So here you'd want to sort of give someone beans and legumes. You know, that can increase lysine in the amino acid pool that's available to the body, because if you don't have enough of this, you know, all of these here, you know, below, past this line, your body can't use them, and I think, you know, can increase acidity, and they're just wasted. So you know, consistently, if someone's eating a diet that is deficient in one of these key essential amino acids, it can cause problems. 309 is another one to look out for on this. I'm just going to stop share a minute. Share screen again. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. There we go. So 309 is another one. It's just here, but it's an essential amino acid. And that can be low on a sort of low protein diet generally. So if that one shows, that might mean they're not having enough protein generally. But again, it's you can boost it with legumes. And the other one that is rate limiting is tryptophan, which is low in corn. I don't really see very many people who are just surviving on corn, so that doesn't really come up in this context, but it's one to bear in mind. So we are nearly at the end. I'm going to whoosh through quickly, very quickly, if that's all right, Helen, on sugar regulation.
Yes,
We've
please.
done 45 minutes, but shall I just cover those?
Okay, yeah, we've got some questions. So yeah, if you can cover the sugar regulation, that'd be really interesting.
Okay, so I just want to do two things, two patterns on sugar regulation, and then it's over for questions. So first thing I want to say is, let's just do this here. Right, is this sugar regulation priority? It's always bang on. I've never not seen it to be bang on. If someone's got an issue with sugar regulation, that's a priority. What that's showing is someone who can't maintain a steady blood sugar level. So instead of sort of gentle rises and falls, you know, there's too much of this, you know, blood sugar going up and down too rapidly. So you've got energy highs and lows, mood swings, food cravings, especially for carbs, you know, feeling irritable, shaky, lightheaded if meals are delayed, feeling anxious, I mean, incredibly anxious sometimes, even sort of impending feelings of doom if blood sugar's, you know, really hypoglycemic. I've seen that with someone who's an alcoholic. Poor concentration, headaches, and then feeling sleepy after meals. That can be a sign of reactive hypoglycemia. The main priority in your scan, the main is to look for that sugar regulation, is to look at your client's symptoms, or maybe ask if they have those. If you see a red on that, or purple these days, on that sugar regulation priority, then ask them that. So that's the main thing I use, but then I always take a look here, and you know, I don't know if you guys do this, but look within. It is a bit of a pain sometimes because there's so much to look within. Is it going to come up? So always take a look at the spleen integrator. It's been very slow. Things gone. No, here we go. Right, so I'm always looking here. I'm looking for these islets of Langerhans because they are the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. And it's not diagnostic, of course, but if there's a top priority there, it might mean that, you know, sugar regulation issues have been going on for, you know, quite some time, and the pancreas is starting to struggle. So I would also look there. Or, you know, a sudden shock can also do that, and hence the name of this integrator, you know, the shock spleen integrator. It can be a sudden shock and cause real issues in sugar regulation, in function of the pancreas, spleen, pancreas. You know, someone can develop diabetes honestly instantly after loss of a loved one or being in a car crash. So actually, I know someone who was in a burning building in the West Indies, and he had to jump, I don't know, 6 floors, broke his ankle and everything. And obviously in fear for his life, and he got diabetes after that. So, you know, that can happen like that. So islets of Langerhans is also, you know, an interesting one to look at. I will jump around a bit if I can, because the other thing you might want to look at is in EI4. I look for the sympathetic and the parasympathetic field. So, you know, well, this priority, you know, 4 here. This is me, by the way. Shows how stressed I was this day. Yeah, sympathetic, parasympathetic balance. That's your, you know, your fight and flight and your rest and digest, and that's very much involved with sugar regulation. And then EI9. There's also, yes, I was. It's also the adrenal medulla. So that's the part of the adrenal glands that link to the nervous system. So that's your real sort of instant adrenaline burst to stress. So those are very much tied in with sugar regulation. So look for those as well. And that's a very common pattern in sugar regulation, is people living on adrenaline, driving themselves, whipping their adrenals with coffee and hyping themselves up, no time to rest and digest, and that affects digestion, but it also affects sugar regulation. Nutrients, it's on your handout very quickly: B vitamins, chromium, magnesium, manganese. But also look at the branched chain amino acids, which are leucine, isoleucine, and valine, because they're used in energy production and muscle building. So they actually might be helpful to give to someone, and you can get those, and it's no harm with trying those with someone if that sort of fits with your client's pattern. So finally, the other sugar regulation one I want to look at is insulin resistance. And it's not quite so obvious. It's very much linked with sugar regulation, of course, but that sugar regulation priority is really bang on for those people who really going up and down, and just that priority alone will tell you that something's up. With insulin resistance, the body's been struggling with energy production for a long time. The pancreas is struggling, the cells are struggling. More insulin is produced to keep the sugar within safe limits, which is very tightly regulated. But as the cell receptors are flooded with insulin, they can become a bit overwhelmed, and all that sort of insistent hammering from insulin, trying to get the glucose in, the cell receptors can start to shut down, or they just become less sensitive to the signal from insulin. So I guess we all know what that's what's going on there, because it's a common thing. I think most of us know about that, and the fact that raised insulin is you really don't want it. It's a marker for inflammation. It's a marker for aging. It's part of a cluster of symptoms. Sometimes it's called syndrome X, which is the weight around the middle, raised cholesterol, raised blood triglycerides, and raised blood pressure. And it's linked with many conditions, but particularly diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. So look to your client. You definitely don't say, "Oh, this is insulin resistance pattern," but think about it. When I'm looking at the scan, sugar regulation might be there, but I find that it's glucose metabolism is the one I see that comes up most often here. And this might just be me, but I link this to energy production within the cells and at the cell membrane, at the mitochondrial membrane. So that's the one I see most often. You might also see carbohydrate metabolism, but that could be digestion and or management of carbs. Fat metabolism, same thing. And basal metabolic rate could show, because conditions generally group together. So, if you've got sugar regulation, insulin resistance, that can affect the thyroid and your metabolic rate. Again, look at EI12, the islets of Langerhans, because that is a big clue. The nutrients that might come up very quickly now are, all of the ones that are involved in sugar regulation. Sounds being very slow, so I can't wait for it to keep up with me. Too slow. That's here. Well, it's being slow. So, but look for homocysteine, because that's something that can link with insulin resistance and can be linked with raised blood pressure, and the fact that you need B12, folate, betaine, and B6 to metabolize homocysteine. Essential fats, especially omega-3, that might be linked with it as well. Cholesterol might also be showing in the fat thing, because cholesterol could be too high with insulin resistance. Often that's the most common reason for having raised cholesterol. So that's it. I'm sorry I can't see anyone, so I've just been looking since I minimized you all. So I'm now going to stop. I'm now going to stop share because I feel a bit more connected to you all now, because I was just sort of looking at my pattern. So I don't know if there was any eye connection because I couldn't see anyone. So sorry about that. That's it. I'd just like to say, trust your scan. It's always accurate, except that you're not going to know everything that's going to come up. I have to accept. I have to go with the flow. If something doesn't jump out at me, I'm just going to park it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just scanning and treating. The infoceuticals are solutions. The body field is just, delighted to accept their messages, and the My Health too. We all know how fabulous that is. So there's nothing wrong with just scanning and treating. That's it.
Thank you, Sue. I've got like 5 pages of notes written down. It's really interesting because I know when the screens first came out, and I was like so excited, but then I didn't really know what to do with them because there was just so much information. So it's really interesting actually looking for those patterns. So thank you for sharing everything with us today. I know I, for one, really appreciate your time. We've got a few questions that have come up. So let me just start from the top. Right, from Jane, there's a brilliant document on Netflix called Bleeding Edge that's identified a direct correlation between the cobalt in joint replacements and dementia. So I don't know if that's sort of putting on the spot a bit, but that's a question from Jane Unsworth.
Well, no, I've also seen that with cobalt, because of course that's one of those things that can be, it could go in the toxic metals section, because too much cobalt, and it is in certain, it is in joint replacements, and so that could be an issue. That's absolutely good to flag that. That's an example of, so again, if someone's got joint issues and they've got a hip replacement and cobalt shows, then you think, then what you might be doing is a sort of using some general sort of nutritional support to help sort of draw metals out of the body. I don't think people can have their hip replacement removed, so they just need nutritional support too. But yes, that's a good point. It is one of those things that could also be a toxin to a higher level.
Okay, thank you for asking that question, Jane. Another one from Helen King. How are you comparing the nutrition screens in the compare the scans? Because it's got all the what we term as the drivers, integrators and terrains in there. And then you also mentioned the free radicals in compare the scans. And where is that? Oh, hang on, she said, don't worry, she's found it. Okay, so the question then is, how are you comparing? So on the compare the scans, are you comparing everything together? I know when you just click on it, it just compares the nutraceuticals. Are you then obviously adding in the
so I don't just look at the infoceuticals on compare the scans. I untick that box or tick the box, whichever way around it is. So I'm doing all the, I don't think it's absolutely everything in the scan, but I'm looking at the nutrients. I'm ticking it so the nutrients are included in my scan comparisons. So they're there, and I think we spoke to Dave. I think that might be in the pipeline, where they're going to make that document a little bit more user friendly, and I hope sort of like do it in the order that things come up in the scan and group them together within that way alphabetically, and also make it so people don't have to cut and paste it. So because I think it's very useful, that document.
Okay, thank you. And another one from Joanne. She's asking, is it a good idea to recommend bone broth if amino acids come up as a priority?
Yes, I can't see anything wrong with that at all, because that helps to heal the gut, and it does help to build proteins. It gives you some amino acids, and it's good for the immune system.
I know you're always getting on about me for bone broth. It just, it's on my list of things to do. Okay, just moving on. Another message from Helen King. The gluten sensitivity in compare the scans. Where's that in the actual scan?
Well, that's the thing that hopefully Dave will be working on, because it is annoying. You've got gluten under G, lactose is under L, and then you've got most of the rest of, I think the rest of the food sensitivities are under F for food sensitivities. So it's under G for glutamine, but hopefully it will come into, so they'll all be grouped together. But it is there in the scan comparisons.
Okay, so there's all the questions that are coming on the chat while we've been while Sue's been going through everything. If anybody's got a question, if you want to unmute yourself, then you can ask the question. So Emma, you've got your hand up. You okay?
Yeah. Hi Sue. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. I was just interested a little. If you're able to explain a bit more about if there's a priority, if it's coming up as purple, is that meaning there's a lack, or is it meaning there's too much?
Yeah, I said that at the beginning, but I'm talking quite fast as well. You don't know. You really don't know. No. So it was exactly, the example with that one where I said the tyrosine came up as a top priority with that woman with food sensitivities, tyramine. So that was, the tyrosine was, she didn't need tyrosine. It was telling me, that was the thing that was going on. the conversion of tyrosine into tyramine was the problem for her. So a priority on any nutrient could definitely be too much. With cobalt, yes, it could be toxic, so got to think that. You know, with a guy with iron, even though he needed iron, it didn't show as a priority. So you really have to go with the flow. So
right,
you're not necessarily going to know. And also, when I've had to accept I don't know, particularly sometimes with the amino acids, sometimes they jump out at me. The very first time I scanned that woman, you know, the tyramine, tyrosine, I could see the pattern immediately. Sometimes I think, oh, I think there's a methylation here, or I can see a neurotransmitter thing there, but I just park it and do the basics, and then maybe come back to it if it keeps coming up over time.
Yeah, so that, do you mind, just that leads on to my next question, is how many scans that you see it showing up would you consider then, or yeah, I need to take action? Sort of 3 scans, or?
Again, it really depends on my client. So with the boy with autism, I did wait for 3 times for that cobalt to come up before we did anything, because you know, he's quite sensitive to lots of things. You don't want to go in there with an individual nutrient. We were doing other things, but his mum is really well informed, and you know, we talked about it, and you know, she's tried a particular type of B12, the patch thing, and that has actually helped him. So
Right,
but it depends. With the guy who had the iron and saw that vitamin E and his anemia, that was so urgent. I didn't wait to, I thought, no, I'm putting that vitamin E in single dose immediately with him.
right, okay. It's difficult, isn't it, when you get the red, purple, and you think, well, am I short in that, or are they, you know, or is it too much?
Yeah. So you'll never know. So and always go for the food sources as well. That's really good. I mean, what would be nice, it would be really good, I think, hands up everybody, if we had a little sort of system where we had a little, you know, summary of the nutrients. We could just sort of tick food sources of B12, we could tick it, and it suddenly went into a PDF for people. So I didn't have to sort of, because I do all that for people, but it takes me forever and a day. But you could then give them food sources. That's the best place to start, and definitely look out for those digestion, absorption things, because those patterns could be very key to why nutrients are coming up.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That's okay. And it's really nice to see people rather than just my screen.
That's the thing when you're presenting on your...
Oh, God.
Anybody there? We were also here. Nobody fell off the call, which is good news. Yeah, I will make a note of that for development team, because I think that would be really useful, having those food sources for if something shows on a scan. That would be brilliant. And any other questions for Sue? What you'll need to do is unmute yourself, please.
Can I ask a question, Sue, please? John?
Yes.
Well, I have a client that suffers long-term depression and anxiety, and I've been working on the scan, and it showed up the some of her amino acids. I can't remember which ones they were, but I was reading a book on nutrition, and it's Judy. It's what's she called? Trudy Scott, and she was saying that usually it's tryptophan when they're lacking in it, they get depression or anxiety. But you were saying about a shock can cause them to the pancreas to go out of balance, a trauma. Well, she's trauma all her life, so I'm kind of a little bit up and down. A scan is all over the place.
Okay. Well, you always have to sort of like tie her scan into where she is and talk to her about that, if that's what you do. I mean, I do a lot of talking in my practice. It's, you know, more talking than anything else. So you always go to your client first off. And if you're not sure about, you know, what to do, then scan and treat. I would say that.
Yeah.
It's not that the EI12 is the cause of anxiety. It's that a shock then can really knock that integrator out. So bringing that integrator back into balance with the infraceutical, or working with any of the stress and emotional infraceuticals, or helping your client to work in that, or to release that trauma with infraceuticals, or with you know, whatever therapy, can be very, very useful with anxiety. With tryptophan, you're looking at a different aspect. You're looking at the fact that it can make serotonin. So if you have low serotonin, or high serotonin, that can cause anxiety, depression. So there's 5-HTP. You can't get tryptophan anymore, but there's something called 5-HTP, but you've got to be super cautious with that. I'm always really cautious. You can't give that to anyone who's on an antidepressant medication, or for example, and it can always make someone worse. So I would never look at the amino acids first off. I'd heal the gut, look for cofactors involved in amino acid metabolism, especially B6, but again, I wouldn't necessarily give just B6. I might give a B complex. And then perhaps, if I know, I might consider using an individual amino acid to help support serotonin in this case.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
okay, yeah. And so you're saying heal the gut then, aren't you? Look at the gut before you look at the amino acids, but the amino acids need to be in the gut as well, don't they? So it's like, would you recommend giving them a mixture of gut enzymes or digestive enzymes?
I mean, I do different things. I mean, I like a fermented sort of plant extract drink that I give to people quite a lot, which is a sort of source of really good bacteria that can help. I like colostrum a lot. I'm always looking at the emotional side to heal the gut. Those are my main things. And I will try to heal it. Sometimes it's a chicken and egg type thing, because you've got to remove the triggers, but sometimes you can't give the nutrients that are required until the inflammation is a bit reduced. Sometimes you just have to sort of, but that's why the scan is so great, because it will say, here's the pathway, the infoceuticals that I need, here are the treatments that I need. And then if you see the overall pattern in the scan, it is showing a pathway, I always find, as to what to do next.
Okay, that's a great answer. So you're saying the fermented plant.
It's something called Pro-M-San. I use Pro-M-San a lot.
Okay.
It's by a company called Tissot. It's a German company.
Oh, okay. So can you get it in this?
It doesn't seem. I mean, if someone's got small bacterial overgrowth, that wouldn't be a good thing to give them. So.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's so complicated with the gut. It's like, which one is it? I suppose when you're saying that, then you say watch the scan and then see what they need on the nutrition. I do think she needs a lot of something to work with her nutrition. I need to work with her nutrition a lot, I feel, and I'm trying to start going down that road. It's just that it's so complex, isn't it? It's like, do you refer them to a nutritionist, but then you're wondering if they are the nutritionist. You have to really make sure the nutrition knows as well.
I mean, if it's complex, if nutrition isn't your thing, I would say refer to a nutritionist. But your client will have come to see you for the healing that you can give.
That's it.
So just trust that, and a good diet.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Kelly, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself? Hang on, I can do it for you. Okay, quite forget.
So.
Oh, hello.
Hello. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm much happier now. I can see people. I'm in my comfort zone.
So quite a lot of my clients seem to have come up just recently with fungus and bacteria. How would you just trust doing the infoceutical protocol? What would you suggest, putting them on anti-candida things as well?
Probably. Well, no, not first off. So that's what, fungus in the terrains and fungus in the environment screen, is it?
Yeah.
Well, you can't really put someone on a detox program, I don't think, until they've got good energy and they're de-stressed, and if there's gut inflammation. That's why I'm always looking at those priorities within the gut to see if I can see anything in the mucosa. I'm always asking my client what their symptoms are. So I don't think you can do that really unless someone's got the energy. That's my take on it. And then I might go in with some antifungal stuff if I keep seeing. Yeah, definitely. If it fits my client, then I would go in with something like that, depending on what else might be there. oregano extract is quite good for fungal infection and bacterial infection and parasite infection. So I often use an oregano extract to sort of help to cleanse the body systemically. It works systemically. So I would look at that, and definitely if it's coming up in the environmental screen, you need to look at, you know, are there any sources around them. The same in the nutrition screen. I think I had the food sensitivity screen. I had a discussion with you, Helen. You were saying like cashew nuts keep coming up and they're not even eating cashew nuts. And I see that, but cashew nuts can be quite moldy. So if people have got a fungal issue, you know, the food sensitivities isn't necessarily saying there's an immune reaction here. It's just saying I can't handle this food right now. Same with the environmental sensitivities. You know, you might not have been exposed to that. The body can't handle it. So look at the pattern. And I've seen that pattern, things that are sort of a bit fungally in food, and I see that in the environmental, or I see the fungal terrain coming up. I see that little pattern. And if that is coming up, all of those, and you think your client's got the energy to do it, then yeah, antifungal protocol.
So best build up the energy first with maybe bone broths, things like that. Are you saying sort of not go into crazy if you're not a nutritionist?
Yeah, I mean, always go to diet, you know, hydrate, varied diet, heal the gut, reduce stress. That's it. Be happy. So yeah, that's what I always do first of all. And with getting the energy up, it's not just bone broths, but it's getting, you know, that energy metabolism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another pattern I could go into, but you know, B vitamins are very important there.
Okay, so, and a lot of, just as a part B to that, I notice a lot of clients think that probiotics are the go-to all the time. You know, they go, oh, I'm on probiotics. But I mean, I've been reading quite a lot about that, and it might not, you know, they might be on the right strain of probiotics, or is that a thing that you can always...
Yeah, I mean, you never know. There are sort of various tests you can have, which I don't really use, where you can sort of look at the microbiome a bit more, but the microbiome is supposed to be as individual as your fingerprint. I've been to lectures where they say, well, probiotics, they don't really settle in, they just sort of wave, and they travel through, they wave at the sort of like microbiome there, and they just give the microbiome a message like, hi guys, do this, do that. So you don't necessarily build them up. With probiotics, you've again, you've got to think of the prebiotics and the diet that encourages them to thrive. So again, that's a plant-based diet mainly. You know, of course, then you've got people who've got too much of that, a dysbiosis thing, and they can't have some of those plant foods until you've cleared that with something like oregano. So there's that way around as well. But yeah, look to feed and nourish the friendly bacteria. And you know, we also feed them by going outside in nature, getting soil on our hands, not washing them obsessively. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but you know, by going outside and in the woods and in the earth. Okay.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, I think we've got Emma was waving at you. Emma, do you want to unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, it was just something to throw in about the fungal situation and sort of my own personal experience. And then I used to, haven't done it for a while, get Vega testing. So there you can really specifically test dosage of nutrients, and you know, like you were talking about just then with Kelly, you can get more specific with that kind of testing. And the lady that works, she does nutritional work, and she was saying that actually a lot of the fungal situations can also be exacerbated by people doing a lot of fermented, you know, there's all this big thing about taking fermented foods, and you know, you've got to be very careful what's in, because that can actually create a candida issue. And you know, for example, I got some bone broth, it's got yeast in it. So, you know, just check what's on the packages of things, because often you know, you can be actually enhancing a candida issue. I don't know if you know, Sue, you probably know about this, but I just thought I'd mention that, 'cause you've got to be careful.
Yes, you do have to be careful. I mean, with yeast and things, I'm not so sure about the fermented foods and a candida link. I mean, it certainly can cause a bacterial issue. Maybe it can cause a fungal issue. I don't really see that very often, but yeah, it's always very individual, and
Yeah,
you have too many. I mean, I've got clients who can't even have a teaspoon of fermented foods, and they'll have a huge reaction to it. So you can definitely overdo that.
Yeah, it was just something she's come across.
That's interesting.
Testing and being, with the nutrition.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it showed it was a situation for me. I had to sort of pull back on anything that was fermented, even yogurt. Yeah, because it is kind of fermented.
Yeah, and that was a candida thing, not a bacteria thing.
Yeah, it was fungal.
Okay,
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, because she can identify through Vega testing. She can identify specific bacterias, and specific fungus.
Okay.
I mean, that's what Peter used, wasn't it? Anyway, to actually do this, create the NES system, he used Vega testing.
Mm-hmm.
That was the machine.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do that. So I have a great deal of faith in that. So
yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was just
no, it's great. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of people had to go off. I just realised it is actually 5:15. We did sort of say 45 minutes. We've probably gone slightly over. But yes, everyone sort of saying thank you very much. Really good information. A couple of quick questions. One from Maria. She's sure you can get, if I can get this word correct, tryptophan from epigenetics. Yes, thank you very much. And all the individual amino acids and the BCAAs.
Well, I didn't think you could get individual tryptophan after there was a scare in China, I think it was. I can't even remember now, where it was contaminated. So I was pretty sure it's banned. I mean, it might be called tryptophan, but I would have thought it's 5-HT is 5-hydroxytryptophan. Maybe maybe they brought it back in. You certainly didn't used to be able to get it. But.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thank you everybody for turning up today, and thank you so much to Sue. I've learned so much. As I said, I took quite a number of pages of different notes and learnt some stuff, and I think it really does come down to, what you said at the beginning, Sue, you've got to look at the client, haven't you? Because it's so difficult when you're looking at a scan, because, two scans may be very similar, but it's actually a completely different message on each scan and what that client actually needs. So, I've picked up some stuff. I know, and I'm sure a lot of other people have, and we've had some really nice messages coming in. So before we go, I think we have to do these the customary wave. Don't we? We all have to wave, because nobody ever knows when to leave, do they? So thank you very much for joining, everyone. Okay, see you all next month. Bye.
Bye.